morning. This is Eric Whalen from Super Secret Project X. This is another Sunday morning sketch. I might be a little slow this morning. I'm a little under the weather, but I'm functioning. Mostly.
Thank you for joining us on this last day of 2017.
New Year's superstitions. It's bull. It's the same. Today's the same as tomorrow. So, yeah, that's right. You know that's true. All right.
Well, I was going to say something, but it would have brought down the attitude of the entire thing, and I don't want to do that.
Oh, now you're being the party pooper.
Yeah, there's a
All
hair
right.
in your coffee.
Dang it, really?
On the other side. On the cup.
Oh, where is it? Here?
There you go.
Oh, yeah, that's nasty. Okay. All right, back into what I'm supposed to be doing. Yeah, I'm a little disfocused. Okay, so I'm going to try something a little different here, and it's not because it's New Year's. It's because I've been real tired in the evening, so I've been watching He-Man, which is really good when you're tired because you hit stupid o'clock and you're giggling at all the dumb stuff. There was a number of things I thought they did right on the show. And one of which is one of its most iconic things, and this is clearly the toy, not from the cartoon, but I chose the toy because this is very clear. Castle Grayskull. As ridiculous as this is, it is stunningly amazing because it is exactly what it's supposed to be. So I am not going to be trying to... I'm not going to draw like this Castle Grayskull. I feel like doing an interpretation today. Because it's been, honestly, a while since I have drawn castle stuff, and I thought, what a great opportunity. So that's what I'm going to do. So, let's do the thing. Alright. Right on. By the way, I am running low. Got only a couple more. I'll be switching over to a new sketchbook soon. Yeah, not sure if that actually means anything, but let's center that a little bit better. Someday I'll have my own cameraman. Probably not, but that's fine. All right, now I'm going to go a bit away from the show. I've seen some of the original paintings, and it was like up on a mountain. In the show, it was in like this... It was sort of floating over like these skeletal crab legs, which was awesome in a completely stoned-out fantasy sort of way. But I really kind of like the tall mountain, and I kind of feel like doing some Rocky Mountain kind of stuff, which is why Castle Grayskull itself is going to be kind of small, because I want to kind of do the rocks and the mountain. So this is mostly for me. The show is almost always entirely for my own amusement, and I feel like trying this thing, so I'm going to play with the thing. Do the thing. What now?
The thing at the place.
The thing at the place? Well, I'm at the place right now doing the thing. Touché. Alright, now I've kind of got a rough, quick. I'm not going to do an entire picture here, but I feel like doing a tall bit of something. Why isn't the skull gigantic on there? Because I'm not drawing the skull on Castle Grayskull, I'm drawing the entire thing. So, let's see here. Right now, I am just not worried too much about any one detail. I'm going to go in and roughly figure out where stuff is. parts of the castle that just isn't in the original version, 'cause I wanna. There we go. Drawbridge comes out here, so I need a little bit of land over here for it to land on. Yep. It was funny, I was watching He-Man, like I obviously mentioned earlier, and I thought it was, it's like perfect for like what it's supposed to be, and like every other version that they came up with afterwards was missing something. Some of them just flat out were bad. But I'm sitting there going like, man, if they just kind of just really concentrated on what made the original show like so iconic and then tried to do new stuff. Like there's little bits and pieces. Like I wouldn't get rid of like Ram Man, as ridiculous as some of the characters are. I would like just stick him in a whole new fashion, like right in the camera, and be like, deal with this moronic, springy-legged. I mean, the guy clearly runs his head square into walls many times a day. I mean, he's brain damaged, clearly. And I'm like looking at it going like, man, I would just keep it. Just admit to the fact that he's not talking stupid because he's an idiot. He's got brain damage. You know, and I'm like watching the show going like Skeletor. Okay, outside the fact you can maybe make him a little darker, I would not change him much at all. You insipid boob! You know, I mean, he's just like... I would keep him saying boob a lot. That always cracked me up.
Well, of course. You're a little boy and you're hearing the word boob. Of course you're going to laugh at it.
Yeah, but here's the funny thing. I didn't watch a lot of He-Man as a kid. I was more of a G.I. Joe kid. But I when I caught it, I thought it was fun, but it just was not easily watchable. It's like She-Ra. It just wasn't really on in my area a whole lot. G.I. Joe, oh yeah, absolutely. So I've seen a lot more of it now as an adult, and I'm finding him way funnier than I probably should. He's just funny.
Well,
I mean,
I think with it's like the documentary we were watching last night, the toy documentary, the toys that made us. The guy who was talking about Skeletor, he was saying that if he had the classic sinister voice, we'd probably forget about him as a
Oh, yeah.
character. But it's
Yeah.
like his voice made the character, and I'm pretty
Oh,
sure
yeah.
when they were doing the voice tracks and the voice actors were doing their lines, though, I'm pretty sure the actor, which I'm forgetting the actor's name for Skeletor.
he's a great
Yeah,
actor. He's so
I'm pretty
funny.
sure he probably ad-libbed or had a lot of fun with that stuff, and just he gave the character life as we see it.
Oh yeah, so funny, so ridiculously funny. And so like, I mean, he's so unbelievably stereotypical, which is why he is amazing. You know, it's like you almost want to watch the Skeletor show. You know, well, they in the special the toys that made us, they were talking about how the original version of He-Man was a toy line, and then they're like, well, nobody knows who any of these characters are, so they're like, okay, we got a comic book.
Right.
And then when they got the comic book done, a lot of people were like, this isn't enough, so boom, cartoon, which was super awesome the way that happened. But the thing that I thought was interesting, they were showing bits of the original comic, which I've never seen. I was kind of aware that it existed, but beyond that, I just really didn't know. And the thing that I thought was really cool was he was so much more like Conan in the original version. A lot of the silly stuff was just not even there.
Yeah.
And so I'm kind of going like, I kind of want to see like that version of He-Man, but with like some of the design aesthetic and some of the wild, crazy visual stuff that they, you know, some of the because the animation looks so specific to He-Man, and I would keep some of that because as goofy and messed up as some of He-Man is, and fine, I've insulted some fans, I don't care. Some of it was really goofy. There's bits of the animation stuff that's really nice. There's bits of the background that's really, really nice. There's a whole lot of stuff there that I'm just going like, there's good stuff here. I mean, without, you know, being condescending or anything. There's some good stuff here. There's a reason why people giggle at it. I mean, I giggle at it, and I kind of enjoy it. I like She-Ra better, but He-Man's pretty fun. Yeah. Boom, get down on the castle here. Adjust the lighting. What you doing, sweetie?
I'm just showing you the perspective from what you're doing.
Oh, that's fine, Harm. I'm literally looking at it. I don't understand. Why is Castle Grayskull so small? Because sometimes smaller is better.
Once again, with the documentary, they said how when they originally sculpted Grayskull, they had it near perfect, and then they realized that
It was too small.
the opening was too small for the figures.
Yeah, it's always funny. I work in a corporate environment, kind of like that, and it is always filled with one detail never being thought of. It is always that way. It's so funny that you end up going like, no one thought of that. No one thought it was a good idea that the jaw bridge on Castle Grayskull was big enough to have the figures walk through. You kind of go like, really? That didn't occur to anyone. Nobody said anything. You're sculpting a giant skull castle for weeks or days or however that couple weeks, and it never occurs to you that the figures might want to walk through the front door.
I think it's just one of those things where they were so pressed for time and so trying to get it done that they just didn't think about it. Because it's like when we're drawing something and we're like, oh, okay, we got to get this done, got to get it down, and then we finish it, and then we step back and realize that one hand is bigger than the other.
I know, I get that, but like one of the things that we, at least I try to do at work, many do, not all, but many, you check all the significant details before you start. You know, like, how many legs does somebody have? What does this thing have to do? So that's why I'm kind of like, nobody mentioned. You know, like, the figures have to fit through the front door. You know, I was actually sitting there just laughing, watching it, going like, of course nobody said that. Of course nobody mentioned that detail.
Yeah, my thought behind that was, with them doing that, they did not have any of the figures that they could sit next to it. That was my only thing.
Now,
like,
that makes sense, yeah.
Like they couldn't just, like, run upstairs, grab one of the figures, bring it back downstairs, and compare. That's the thing. I was like, how come they just didn't do that? But on the other parts, I can understand, because they were like, okay, we got to get this done. We have 2 weeks to get this finished, or however much. I think it was 2 weeks, however much time it was, and we got to get going. And they just dived right in and and were like, okay, we'll fix it in post or something like that.
Well, my favorite bit was they were going in and they were trying to get everything done, and they had all these vehicles and stuff, and they ran out of money. So they didn't have any more money to make the tooling for the molds for new vehicles, but they needed something. So they went into their old Big Jim toy line and pulled out one of the tigers, and they were like, well, it's like the Big Jim dudes are like 14 inches and the He-Mans were like 6 or something. And they're like, well, this tiger is huge. And somebody goes like, I don't care, put a saddle or something on it. You know, and then they did that, and they're like, we got Battle Cat. You're like looking at it going, so they spray painted it green, put orange stripes on it, like, put a saddle on it. And I was really laughing hard.
I love that part, actually. That was pretty good. Like, we don't care. Like, well, he needs a companion. Like, he's a giant tiger. Put a saddle on him. So they came back with a saddle. Perfect.
Well, the funny thing is then they showed what they came up with, and you're going like, well, it looks like they really thought that out, but they didn't. They threw it together, and it was like ridiculously perfect. It was like exactly what it, should be. And you're like, oh, freaking brilliant, because that's really what I love is how things kind of come about like that. Like, my favorite bit was in the G.I. Joe episode, and they were talking about how they created all the Joes, and it never occurred to them to give them villains. And somebody was like, yeah, just make them fight like Cobra or something. And then they're like, oh, yeah, we could do that. And so, like, Cobra, like, one of the biggest reasons why G.I. Joe was successful was like have them fight like Cobra. And I believe the guy actually just said, yeah, have them fight like, I don't know, Cobra or something. And I'm just sitting there going like, that is really how most things actually happen. A lot of fans want to believe it's some kind of big, like think tank kind of thing.
Brainstorming, light from God kind of.
Yeah, and it usually isn't. It's usually like just some sort of like weird moment where some dude that doesn't even care about games or toys or whatever you're talking about goes like, it needs blank, and it's like. And then everyone goes like, what, like blank? And he's like, yeah, like blank. And then blank ends up being like Skeletor. Or whatever. No, not in this particular case. It'd be like Cobra or Battle Cat. And I'm like just totally going like, yeah, of course that's how that works. It's been like my entire experience at work, where you're just going like, oh, of course that's how that happened. Yes, clearly. One of my favorite bits is they did the original Castle Grayskull sculpt, and because engineers did it, all the lines were straight, and so they were like, no, it can't be straight. So, like, the dude just grabbed a bunch of claims. Everything has to be off angle and weird. And I'm like, yes, of course everything needs to be off angle and weird. That's how these things work, So it makes castles interesting. Some of them literally look like they're going to fall over, and they've been standing for like hundreds of years, you know. That's why they're so fascinating. And then the really big square ones, you know, they're the ones that aren't that interesting looking, just look just foreboding and dangerous because it's like, you know, like a giant brick in the landscape, you know, like, wow, it's like a statement right there kind of thing. Yes, I don't care that Castle Grayskull doesn't have a dome in the back. I'm giving it a dome in the back. Fanboys who are mad, go deal with it. I honestly do not care.
I think one of next year's mantras, at least for me, is going to be just let people enjoy things.
Yeah. Yeah, to me it's like, you just want the same thing over and over again? Well, then that's easy. Just watch the same thing over and over again. And there's no mystery there. That's you can literally just do that. And so the fans that are like, well, I want new fill in the blank. Dragon Ball Z. Well, you didn't do Dragon Ball Z right. Well, why did you ask for more? Well, we basically want the original. Well, then watch the original. But we're tired of watching the original. We love it, but we've seen it already. Okay, so you want new, it needs to be like the old, but you can't change anything. It's like, honestly, make up your mind.
There's a great comic somebody posted taking clips from Courage the Cowardly Dog, and it's a clip where Muriel and oh crap, what was the guy's name? Something like
Eustace.
Eustace, yeah.
Yes.
Muriel and Eustace got changed into little kids, and so Courage is trying to keep them safe as little kids. And the comic simply says, Star Wars fans be like, and it's like Muriel is sitting at a table and Courage is trying to give her food. It's like, more original, less classic, more original, too much original. Ah, perfect. And then she throws the food at Courage and hits him in the face. I don't even like Star Wars.
I don't even like Star Wars.
This is a great comic. Hey Jim, good morning.
Is Jim on?
Yes.
Hey man, how's it going? Yay, it's Jim. I'm doing Castle Grayskull this morning. I have no idea how it's going to turn out. I just felt like drawing castles, so I'm drawing a castle.
Yeah.
And plus giant skull heads, so you gotta love giant skull heads.
There's a character, one of the mini Animaniacs little mini shorts called Mr. Skullhead. I only remember a few of those. Thought they were okay.
He was a skinny character with a big white round skull head, right?
He was a skeleton.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
Yeah,
But he looked like he had just like a big kind of brown.
Yeah, just the cartoony skeleton head.
Yeah, I remember those being okay.
Yeah, they were fun. I think my favorite little non sequitur short of theirs was the little kid with Randy Beeman.
Which was what now?
The little kid who always come out of his door talking about his friend Randy Beeman.
Oh, yeah, I thought he was funny because I wasn't even really sure what that was ever based off of. It was just funny because it was just seemingly so very random. You were like, what?
If I remember, it was like one of the producers or somebody in the staff, it was their actual son telling actual stories.
Oh, was that what it is? Okay.
And they're like, Randy Beeman?
Yeah, I always wondered about that because I was always going like, this just seems so out of like nowhere. And good. It was in fact so out of nowhere. Good. And it's,
Yeah, I'm trying to remember, because I know it was the son of one of the producers, or one of the staff members actually, and I'm trying to remember if it was like him telling actual stories or him just like, they're just like giving him stuff, but I know for a fact it was he was an actual kid telling kid stories. So it was really kind of cute.
so it was Axe Cop before Axe Cop.
Yeah, in a sense, yeah.
Neat.
Almost. Jim says castles and skulls are cool.
They are.
Oh, Excuse me.
Say hey, hey.
Sorry.
That is my explosively gastral baby right there. That's why I married her. Something wrong with that gut. Something wrong in there.
Yeah, it is. That's the problem.
Something wrong going on.
Aye, there's the rub.
Wait, there's the rub.
And we have shuffled off this mortal eternal coil. Must give us poops.
Giving Shakespeare the rub? Ah, whatever. Yeah. I gave Shakespeare the rub.
Isn't that like one of the red light district acts? What the heck?
I was about to say there's more of an ointment, but we can go red light district direction if you want to. More of an ointment, but okay.
To pee or not to pee? That is the question.
I have never been there. I've always known, man, I gotta pee.
No.
I just always known it.
Well, yeah.
It was obvious to me.
But the question of to pee or not to pee is like if you really gotta go, but you're in public.
Oh, well, then you just ask for everyone's, permission
Or you're in a
ahead of time.
Or
And you're like, hey, everyone, can I do this thing?
Or you're in a place that has a very questionable bathroom.
Oh, no, yeah, that's happened a couple times where you're like, man, I know what I'm about to do to this place, but this place, that would actually be cleaner than what this, yeah, no, I've been there. I've been there. You're like, that's, woo, that's nasty. It's actually one of the things I love about that show. I actually think the soundtrack is awesome. Like not like awesome and like the most like, I don't want to say well thought out. That's mean. That's not right. That's not what I mean. But it's like so perfectly like what it is. Like it's really got like legitimately like kind of cartoon perfect action like stuff. And then He-Man's theme song is just he always shows up in the background real low. You just hear He-Man. It's just like I always just start giggling, going like, yes, this is exactly what it's supposed to be. He-Man.
They did a really good job with the scoring on that and with just getting the whole emotional feel for all of the stuff that's happening, even though they've used like the same probably 7 songs throughout the entirety of it.
That's really about it. That's the one thing that I give shows like that credit for. They got the biggest bang for the buck kind of a thing going on, which is really great. But you just hit these moments where you're like, okay, you needed to mix things up just a little bit more. Like I liked later in the 80s, and I want to say, I don't know if it was G.I. Joe or who started it, but like when you'd get a new season, you got a new opening sequence. Mm-hmm. Okay, so there was like a little bit of a refresh happening there. Mm-hmm. So you always got like a new song and a new end song and a new. I'm not sure who did that first, but I liked that, and then like it sort of turned into what we have sort of now, where they either do it right or you're like they just sort of cheese it. Like I really like Ben 10, but like the original Ben 10 opening sequence and song was about perfect for the show. You're not going to get much better. It was, and then later seasons they were trying to like re-edit the whole thing together into a new opening sequence, and it just kept getting lamer. I'm like, no, stop! Just look, you do something completely new from scratch, new song and everything. Or just don't touch it. Why are you touching it? You're like yelling into the bathroom at like the adolescent boy at the editing board. Stop touching it. Stop it. You re-edit Ben 10's opening sequence, you're gonna go blind. Stop it.
I mean, they did so because it was such a recognizable song, and you don't want to change the brand to make it unrecognizable.
Oh, I ain't even gonna argue that. It was a really good song. I'm just saying that they just basically kept damaging it over and over again. I'm like really, just go back. Just go back to what it was. Just go back.
Well, a good example, excuse me, modern day example of doing it right is Steven Universe.
Yeah, no, that's probably the best example I can think
I
of.
mean, the first initial song for the first 3 seasons was really nice and simple, and then when they did the 4th season, they updated it and added a bit more stereo and layers to it, and added a little bit more pizzazz by adding some guitar and stuff in it. It was really nice. And then, of course, they've been getting a lot more money from it, so they were able to update the opening sequence. So yeah, that was actually really well done when they did that, and they kept the original feel and the original song, of course, in general, but it still had the same "This Is Steven Universe" feel to it.
Oh yeah, and when they essentially redid the opening sequences, they were just sort of updating them, and it wasn't really changing it. It's like I think what they were trying to do with Ben 10, but they failed. And I like Ben 10, but I think they just needed to stop touching that opening sequence, because every single time they did it, I just kept going like, okay, I get it. You had to change a couple guys up, but then they made changes that didn't need to happen. You're kind of like, you guys were just sort of. I know what it was. It's just like at work. You had somebody above that said this needs 10% more something. And everyone below them doesn't know what they want, so they do something. And the person up top doesn't actually know what they want. So just changes just happen. At the end of it, so much time and energy has been put into it. Everybody basically goes like, oh yeah, no, that's better. So I think it's what happened with like George Lucas when he did the prequels, and like Yoda in the first prequel looked like Yoda's like drunken uncle, where it was like everybody was like, whatever, we don't care, you changed Yoda, it's good, move on. God, George, stop.
There's a great meme from many years ago with My Little Pony, one of the more like fun episodes of the show, where all of the ponies wanted to get dresses made from Rarity, and Rainbow Dash was trying to tell Rarity what she wanted, but she couldn't tell her because she was doing the corporate speak.
Oh, I hate
and so
that.
Rarity was like, well,
just say what you want.
She's like, well, what do you mean it needs change? She's like, well, it needs to be cooler. And Rarity's like, what do you mean it needs to be cooler? He's like, well, it needs to be cooler. Like, what do you mean? How does it need to be cooler? Like, colors and all that? And Rainbow Dash like, it needs to be about 20% cooler. And Rarity's just like,
yeah, that
what the heck
doesn't
does
work.
that even mean?
Yeah, that doesn't work. That literally means nothing.
That was a great episode.
There was actually a movement at work that was really fascinating. The people above us were no longer were no longer allowed to say, this looks too virtual. It's like,
what does that even mean?
that's it exactly. Okay, so this actually confuses it further, because when they were saying it, on one hand, they would have like a photorealistic 3D render. Well, this looks too virtual. It's like, okay, well, it is made by polygons and stuff. Maybe they're seeing something. And then they'd look at a pencil sketch and go, no, see, it's photographic like this, like a sketch. No, it's photographic like this. And everyone goes like, that's a pencil sketch. So they would look at something that looked like a photo and say it looked too virtual, and then they'd look at a pencil and say, well, this just looks like a photo. And everybody'd be like, no progress could ever be made on some things because nobody had a clue what anybody wanted, and it was maddening.
It's basically they took a word that they just found out and they're trying to apply it to everything to make themselves sound like they know what they're talking about.
Something like that. like my favorite one to date was, okay, one of the things that you do to spark stuff up is you add or you sharpen up the highlights or whatever. For people out in TV land, the highlights are the little bright spots where the light is high. Mm-hmm. Okay, with that being said, we were getting comments like, okay, we need more dark highlights. It didn't take us too long to figure out what they meant. They meant they needed darker spots in the image, right. But they would say things like dark highlights, where you'd be like, what does that mean? What is a dark highlight? Because when you're talking highlights, essentially you're talking about,
Bright spots.
well, not only bright spots, but a reflection or a hot refraction of some kind.
Right.
And so when you're like, well, you need a dark highlight, you're like, well, you just literally said, yeah, I need a fat, thin guy. Like, what? Like, what does that even mean? You need a fat, thin guy. You need a, you know, just, there's moments where, so I kind of see like probably what happens in these shows where I'm like, they've got a corporate person above them that's really brilliant at what they do, but has no idea how to communicate to the artists,
And it's not really,
which is a shame.
yeah, it's not really any fault of their own because they don't speak the artist language.
Well, now, I actually have to put you on pause there, because if you are a $250,000 executive, you're salaried, you're taken care of, the place gives you a car, everything, and it is your job to work with artists, and the artists have to learn new skills 24/7 for decades on end, you have to learn new skills too. And that means that you have to take your corporate speak and learn how to change it to artist speak so you can do your job. We suffer from that all the time at work.
That I don't disagree with you on that. You ain't wrong on that one. But I'm saying, but for the most part, when you have kind of like the underlings who are just like maybe a step and a head above you.
Yeah, they need to do it too.
Who are trying to tell you what it is. It's like in some instances that's what I'm saying. They're learning new words, but they don't know how to use them yet.
And that's the funny thing is I am more than willing to have patience when people are learning things, because that's patience is required for the people around you to learn. It's when they're not learning for like a decade and they just keep doing the same weird thing over and over again, and you keep telling them, it's like, no, that doesn't help. You need to do this instead. And you get to a point where you go like, you're just not trying. I'm sorry. It's like, I walked into my job 13 years ago not knowing ZBrush, not knowing how to 3D print and prototype stuff, blah, blah, blah. I know how to do that stuff now. So to me, the people above me that are paid like 10 times the amount of money I'm being paid, really need to be putting in 10 times the effort, or bare minimum, the same amount of effort. And when they're not, yeah, I end up going like, well, I have to learn stuff. Why aren't you learning stuff? That just drives me nuts. Yeah, that's one of my pet peeves where I'm going like, I don't care how much money they pay you. You know, like, it's like, if I have to learn, you have to learn. If the guys that are doing the janitorial stuff have to learn stuff, you have to learn too, because we're all paid less than you. It means you have to put in more effort. I don't care. I don't believe in this rich people get advantages bull. They already got advantages. They're making a lot of money. This stuff drives me nuts. Urban. And wouldn't that be great? You just walk into a place in the background, music plays, and you just hear like your name. Urban. You're like, oh, I feel important, you know. Drives me crazy. I've been there, hon.
Yeah.
I've been there.
I think today is going to be kind of a lazy day.
You know who else has been there? He-Man.
Well, luckily we got grocery shopping done yesterday, so we don't do about doing that today.
Well, I'm looking forward to getting this done, and then maybe editing the book a little bit. And then getting into a spot where I'm like, man, I think I'm going to put some cartoons on and get the old Surface out and just, I don't know, doodle something selfish and stupid.
Yeah, last day of the year, it's cold out. You know what? Let's just chill.
Yeah, I hear you.
Both of us are tired. Had a rough weekend.
I'm tired.
I'm exhausted.
And darn it, I'm exhausted. Yeah, it's I gotta say one thing is a lot of people and I think it's a legitimate critique because I had an issue with it myself, but also I enjoy some of the shows. Is America basically created toy commercials as TV shows. And I understand the critique of that, and to a great degree I agree with it. I really do. I get exactly what's being said, but on the same note, we had such a bizarre set of shows with such kind of crazy styles to them because of it. Like, I know that there were American animators that went over to Japan in the 80s because they were sick of what we were doing over here and they wanted to work on show of characters and story. I'm not even going to argue with that because that's absolutely true. And there was a lot of really good shows that came out of other countries, Japan being like the tops. But on the same note, there was stuff that was happening in G.I. Joe, and He-Man, and She-Ra, and fill in the blank, Transformers, that were so bizarre because they were based off of toys. That just sort of gave us a goofy edge in a weird way. Like, if we had the same level of story the Japanese were doing, like if He-Man was closer to, like, Fist of the North Star in plotline, I don't know if it would have been as successful. I know I would have been, like, right there. Like He-Man questing to find Teela or whatever. You know, just these, but you end up getting to these points with American shows where you go, like, they kind of hit a stop point as to what they were doing, which is a shame because you end up going like, man, if only they had done a little bit more with blank. Yeah. And they usually didn't. That was the problem. So they'd have like cool adventure points, but then like you'd get to a point where you're like, but that's all you're doing. And that's what I'm kind of bumping into with He-Man. Is I kind of like the fact that they had the in today's lesson, kids. I mean, it's so kind of Mr. Rogers that it's kind of awesome. But on the same note, it was like that was kind of it. You know, they didn't progress on forward. Like one of my favorite bits is they did it on My Little Pony, which was funny. Because I'm like, thank you, that was an evolution of like the joke. Because they would do like in today's episode, kids, Pinkie Pie learned that she shouldn't stick her hand in the oven. You know, that kind of stuff. Which is fine. You know, it's what it is. But then there was the one where Applejack at the end didn't actually learn anything. And then she's like, I didn't learn a thing because I was right the whole time. And I'm like laughing at it, going like, thank you. There's not always a lesson to be learned. Sometimes it's just an action-packed adventure. You know, like in Fist of the North Star, I would have just crapped myself if at the end Bato turned to the camera and go, hello, boys and girls. Today Kenshiro found out that if you blow too many spines out the backs of bad guys with your super martial art magical powers, that the local villagers might not love you anymore because their children will be scared of you. I would have been like, oh my god! I would have been laughing so hard. But you know, and not that they ever had to do that. I'm just saying it was like I would have been like, wow, they're taking a play from our play, or they're taking a play from our book. You know, right on.
With that episode with Applejack, I think my second favorite thing, aside from that particular point, was the nice kind of like friendshipy lesson music in the background, and then when she goes, "I was right all along," and it just changes to.
I remember that, and I was laughing so hard. I'm like, thank you. That's what I mean about breaking the pattern from time to time. And I saw in yes, anybody out there, the wife is a My Little Pony fan, and I'm not the biggest fan, but I've watched episodes and I've laughed my butt off at a couple of them. It's a funny show. It's well enough written that I think that it deserves the fandom that it's got. because they do stuff like that. You know, they break the pattern. And I think that was a weakness of the old American shows, is they didn't break their patterns enough. Like when they finally did on a couple shows, it was like, yeah, like there were some moments in G.I. Joe where they tried a couple little different things. Like there was one episode, and it was like, and Shipwreck was one of my favorites because he clearly should not have been employed by anybody. That's why, even as a kid, I knew that. I thought that was really funny. But like he woke up at the beginning of the episode, you had no idea what was going on, which was actually clever for that time period. And he was all gray, and it was decades later, and he had been horribly injured in a fight from Cobra, and he was in like this perfect little idyllic Americana town. And, you know, he was literally doing the war recovery thing. And he had complete amnesia, couldn't remember the last 25 years or whatever. And as a kid, you're going like, well, this is a complete break in the pattern. Then things aren't quite right, and finally he starts, like, catching on that something is really wrong. And then, like, his wife melts in front of him. I mean, like, literally melts. And as it turns out, Cobra captured him, drugged him, dyed his hair, made him think it was 25 years later, and they were using their synthetic humanoids to trick him into trying to give away, like, G.I. Joe secrets. As a kid, I was like, yeah, like, it was one of my favorite episodes, because it was like, it wasn't the normal thing anymore. It was really bizarre. It was like, yeah, especially when, like, his wife melted, and he was, like, screaming, ah, and then it went to, like, a toy commercial, you know, and it's like, yeah, that's what, it was really awesome, you know?
They had some really crazy episodes.
They did.
I remember the one that was at the...
They had a bunch of bad ones, too.
The Adventures of Shipshape the Pirate.
Oh!
Shipshape the Sailor.
Yeah, there was a bunch of crazy ones. But yeah, but that's the thing, is that's why I kind of preferred G.I. Joe over a lot of the other shows, is at least they would try something different from time to time. You could quite tell, you could literally tell that people weren't paying attention anymore at the high level. They were just sort of on autopilot. And so the artists were kind of getting away with stuff from time to time. But yeah, no, it's, I like a lot of old American cartoons. It's just that there comes a point quite often where you're going like, I kind of wish that they would have got permission to have done a little bit more character, a little bit more story. Because I think we were good on action and, like, shtick, you know?
Well, that time period was really... It was hardcore for cartoons because they all had to have lessons and stuff friendly, and that's when all of the crazy stuff was going on with the censorship and all that. And
I ain't arguing.
Into the late 80s, early 90s with the crackdown of even more cartoons, and Ted Turner declaring war on entertainment and fun and all that hootenanny.
Turner was a jerk.
But yeah, I mean, it had to have a base for everything else to grow from. And I mean, because of all the stuff then, this is what we got nowadays. And I mean, a lot of that stuff has gone away because they realized, oh, maybe this wasn't causing kids to act out. Maybe it was just because we were bad parents, or just kids are just jerks, or kids are going to do what they want to do.
Yeah, maybe it's a little bit more complicated than Tom and Jerry making children violent. That always killed me. I was like, what are you talking about?
Yeah, I'm still trying to figure that one out myself. It's like, how in the world can a generation declare the evils the evils and the pitfalls of what cartoons do to kids psychologically? And this generation came from a generation where people got shot in the face with shotguns.
Well,
like the cartoon wise, like Bugs Bunny and all that. It's
yeah.
Bugs Bunny coming out in the 50s, well, in the 60s and all, and it's like, wait a minute, like these are the same shows that you like proudly laughed at Daffy Duck's bill like going like 3 ways around his face from Elmer Fudd shooting him in the face with it.
Yep.
And then, like, 20 years later, you're saying, oh no, these are violent. But you grew up with those.
Well, what's even weirder is when a lot of those early cartoons were being done, It wasn't World War One, but it was World War Two. It was the Korean War. It was a whole lot of hyper international violence. And then somebody went, oh no, it wasn't, a plethora of reasons. It was clearly a cartoon cat and a mouse lobbing hand grenades at each other. It wasn't humans lobbing hand grenades at each other. It wasn't your uncle that came back from the war telling you nightmare stories.
Yeah, it wasn't PTSD.
It wasn't PTSD or shell shock or whatever the appropriate classification it was at the time. And you just end up going like, I just never understood that. Or cartoons have to have an educational thing to it. Kids just got, and what I love was it was somebody from Europe. I can't remember. It was one of the cartoon people from Europe that did the European shows. And they're like, well, why do Americans put educational things? Like, well, so kids can learn blah blah blah. And like the European guys are like, but they just got back from school. Don't you want them to have some fun and relax after? And that was kind of where I'm from. It was sort of like when I was a kid, I was a bullied kid, so like you got stress from like being at school. So you wanted to, and plus all the learning, and I had some very mild kind of learning disorders. Not terrible, but enough that it made it hard that when you got home, you're like, really, more lessons? Can't I just like enjoy, like, G.I. Joe blowing stuff up without there being a lesson? And one of the guys on the G.I. Joe show actually said something, even as a kid, I thought. He was like, he thought it was morally bankrupt that people were shooting at each other and not getting hit, hurt, and killed.
Oh yeah, on the
And I actually agree with that, being, if you're showing kids that they can shoot guns at each other, no one's ever going to get hurt.
Yeah, and that's
Which is
what,
weird.
Yeah, what she was saying is like, oh yeah, like, well, of course, their Cobra's aiming at you. They're just really bad shots. And I laughed at that because I'm just like, yeah, like all the stuff of like you're showing kids, oh, of course it's okay, and that's why they made them, of course, laser guns because, we don't want
Not in
kids
the
to-
original episodes.
Well, yeah, but I mean, but afterwards though, when they started going into was it the Sunbow or was it no, Sunbow was the original animation.
Something
right?
like that.
And when they made it the red lasers and the blue lasers, of course.
Yeah, the very first episodes, or the mass device, there were shells coming out of the.
Yeah.
I mean, and I'm sitting there going like, look, to me, military is not good or evil. It is. That just depends upon who's running it, who's in it, blah blah blah. So it's like, don't go blaming, like in this case, the soldiers, G.I. Joe. It's like, well, it's like, look, bad stuff happens in the world. Kids need to know that. That's why I never understood sort of the level of like kid glove protection. Strangely enough, the kids were getting. It was like with the Japanese, they were like, oh no, things die, horrible stuff happens to people.
There's nudity and nakedness.
There's nudity and nakedness. And yeah, in many ways, the Japanese were way ahead of us. And then they wonder why some Americans get out in the world with a bizarre mindset. And it's like, well,
Well, I mean, one of the base explanations for that is a lot of the countries don't have the religious stigmas that we have here, and
Yeah,
a lot of that's
true.
based off of that.
true. And it's like, look, I want to respect people's beliefs and all
religious
that.
/ moral stigmas. I'll put it that way.
I want to respect people's beliefs and all that, but there comes a point where it's like, look, do you really want to, with G.I. Joe, for example, fortunately I knew better because I was raised around gun culture, but do you really want to show a bunch of kids that you can just point guns at people and pull the trigger and it's just a big laughing ha-ha situation? To me, that's weird. It's like, if G.I. Joe was done by the Japanese, people would have died,
And I think that's,
and kids would have gotten it.
And
Oh.
that's the thing that there. Once again, there's the rub because you can have the guns and the fancy lasers being pointed at people and being shot and not hit and no one dies. But yeah, before then there was the Tom and Jerry's where people would have pianos fall on them
Yeah.
and of course not die, and anvils are hit in the face with shovels and rakes and all that. And
Well, but there's a difference between an obvious comedy and something where there's like a good and evil conflict with weapons happening, though.
not to a kid.
I think it is to a kid if you present it like a pie in the face or a grenade in the pants is clearly, if done in one context, is clearly a comedic. I mean, I even understood that as a kid.
Oh, same
But
here.
you have a bunch of people like trying to save hostages from the bad guys who have like a mad science device that's stealing stuff. Even as a little kid, I kind of had an inkling that there was a difference.
Oh, and same here. But I think once again we were special kids because look what we grew up to be. I think we understood that aspect because we actually looked deeper into it because of who we are and who we were at that time period, which became who we are now. But I think with a lot of other kids who just kind of watch to be watching, yeah, I mean it's like I remember like one of the stories my mom told me who was a teacher, and she was saying when she was teaching one of the preschool kids or preschool classes, she asked, okay, well, yeah, the question was asked, what do you want to be when you grow up? And of course, there was a couple of kids. I want to be a doctor. I want to play sports or whatever. And then one kid raised his hand and said, I want to be a Power Ranger. And every single kid after that said, I want to be a Power Ranger.
Well, I'm not arguing with a certain lack of understanding of reality
It's just kids.
with kids, but that's also kind of what I'm saying is if you only give them no examples of reality, they're not going to have any idea.
Oh, yeah.
And that's what I'm saying about, if you make kids think one thing and you don't, okay, let's just say that dumb kids and smart kids. The smart kids get it, the dumb kids don't. Okay, but what if you never give the dumb kids an opportunity to understand it?
Yeah.
Then they're really locked in some kind of a crazy alternate reality where pianos can land on people and you can shoot guns at people all day and they won't ever get hurt. I mean, I think that we should give kids the opportunity to attempt to understand that there's a difference.
Oh, I agree. And to me, being a responsible adult figure who are allowing kids to see this stuff, you should also explain to them. I mean, because as many and as much cartoons as I watched growing up, my family also watched them with me. And because we all watched them together, I had a good understanding of what exactly was happening. And my parents or my sisters and brothers would explain to me and in the best ways that they could as
Yeah.
far as what was happening. But for the most part, I got the understanding mostly on my own because I think I could say I was kind of a smart kid, more of a smart alecky kid, but just more shy and all that stuff. But it's like I think if you just have somebody to actually be able to walk with you through that, because I understood the difference between reality and fantasy. I realized that you can't drop anvils on people's heads.
Well, the thing was, I don't think I was all that bright of a kid. Is what I'm. I really don't think I was. That's kind of what I mean about kids have to figure things out on their own, and if they're not given an opportunity to, like if the entertainment is just so moronic and slow and gives them everything and explains to them all the plot points and doesn't give them the opportunity to figure out stuff on their own, that's what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Like when you present reality as one thing and then they get out in the world and it's something completely different and then they have no tools to deal with it. That's where kind of my concern is.
Like the podcast I told you about the kid who believed in Santa until he was 13 because of his parents.
Yeah. What kind of a jerk does that to a kid? Oh, he knows who keep the magic alive. Yeah, until he gets out in reality, and then he, doesn't know what to do because he's of the bizarre mentality that there's an elf living up at the North Pole making billions of toys and moves in the speed of light during Christmas and actually fits his plump backside down everybody's chimneys until you're, 13, 14 did you say? And you end up going like, well, how the heck... What is the basis for this kid's reality? No wonder he's going to make freaking bizarre decisions as an adult.
I'm going for nearly an hour. Just so you know.
Yeah, I'm kind of getting there. I kind of want to get to a point where some of the details are a little more finished up before I stop. This was kind of fun. It's not perfect.
Really good.
Yeah, it's. I think it's looking pretty good. It's not perfect, but I think as a quick, funny hour, quick detailed sketch. Well, and when it comes to a castle, an hour actually is quick. Castles just have a ton of freaking,
Everything.
yeah. That's kind of what I just get so frustrated at times when I see some people's mentalities, and then you go like, and then you wonder why people can't cope with reality, when they believe things like vaccines cause autism, and then they wonder why suddenly, the Black Plague is sweeping through their house. Well, I didn't know that would happen. Yes, you did. You live in a world where over 100 years of knowledge of vaccines exist. You do know. Like smokers that don't know that it's hurting their health and or killing them. They do know. We've known that for approaching a century now. And you end up going like, hey, it's your freedom to do it. I ain't going to judge you. But on the same note, don't turn to me and go like, I didn't see it coming. I can't believe my kid is dying from meningitis because we didn't get him the vaccines. Like, of course you knew. You chose to not give him the vaccines. So, what are you doing? And so it's like, of course kids in the 80s pointed guns at people when watching G.I. Joe and pulled the trigger. They thought a laser was going to pop out and the other guy is going to miss the other kid. And you're going like, to me, I'm like, now give them a sense of reality.
Well, that's the thing. As a kid, I don't really remember hearing many stories of kids dying from either self-inflicted or other-inflicted gunshot wounds because they were playing G.I. Joe.
Well, but you know what I mean. Kids just emulate.
Well, that's what I'm
It
saying.
must have happened.
Well, yeah, they do, and that's what I'm saying. It did happen, but I don't remember hearing...
Specifically?
Yeah.
No, neither did I, but
so
you know
that's-
it happened.
Yeah, but so that's why, as I got older and was trying to realize, or trying to remember, why in the world was there such a crackdown on quote-unquote violent shows when there
Yeah.
wasn't really many violent situations that happened that, in my opinion, would have caused such a presidential level concern. And that's
Because
like, wow,
because
why?
voters and fear and blah blah blah. And don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that they should have censored the shows. I'm saying that they should have actually addressed the shows in a more serious fashion.
Oh,
I still think G.I. Joe was only a step away from people continually dying on that show, and that puts in my mind a certain level of a certain disconnect to reality in kids, and to me, I'm like, well, I would have rather they just would have gone in and just shot some Joes, and some of the Cobra guys went down, and when vehicles exploded, well, there goes rock and roll,
Yeah, when a plane exploded, you don't see the parachute coming out. I think a lot of the censor stuff, and this is what gets me, it's they try to say it was to protect the children. No, it was to keep parents from having uncomfortable conversations.
Well, it's also to keep lawsuits down.
Yeah, and which once again to my point of I don't remember hardly any things happening that would warrant such a scare like that, because it's like there was more fear of the crap, brain is still trying to wake up.
Oh, I hear you.
Of the poison and aspirin. There was
Or the razors and pins and Halloween candy.
Yeah, and it's just like that.
Now
it
that
was,
bull.
Yeah, the level that the cartoon fear was up to that level, and there was no point of it, because it's like when and I think it was spearheaded by was it Nancy Reagan who started the initial
Something like that.
kids or the non-violent cartoon aspect, and then I think it went from there to like Tipper Gore, and then from there I think like Ted Turner jumped on there in the early 90s, and a lot of the shows that were coming through actually got shut down. I mean, SWAT Cats being one of them.
Yeah.
And it was on his network, and so of course he got angry, and that's how we got Captain Planet, which okay, Captain Planet was kind of awesome in its weirdness, but still, it was like all of these great shows that either got shot down or were attempted to get shut down because of people's non-found fears, and that's thankfully when Batman the Animated Series came through.
Seriously.
They basically gave a finger in the later seasons to all that stuff, because they in the Art of Batman book that I got, the animated series book, there was this great drawing that Bruce Timm did of all the things they were not allowed to show in the cartoons. So of course there was Batman and Joker falling out of a broken window, which that was one of the main things. You can't show broken glass.
You couldn't.
So stupid.
You couldn't show gun
Yeah, glass
violence.
don't break.
Yeah, you couldn't show gun violence. You couldn't show children in danger.
Yeah,
You
gun
couldn't
violence
show-
don't happen.
Yeah, you couldn't show drug use. You couldn't show nudity or implied nudity. There was like a bunch of others, and he drew this great picture of Batman and Joker falling out of a broken window. Oh, the blood. You couldn't show blood, but they were like punching each other's faces, so blood and teeth were flying. There was Catwoman falling out, and she was naked. There was a kid falling out with them. Batman had several needles stuck into him, or either Batman or Joker. Joker had a gun pointed directly at Batman. It was a great drawing. These are the things we are not allowed to do. But yeah, all of that got broken later on.
Okay, the best example I can think of, and I'm not going to say they're perfect. I'm not going to be like, oh, the Japanese are the greatest ever. It's like, look, they've got a fairly peaceful society. I know that they've got some serious issues in places. But their cartoons, for a very long time, are so much more excessive than ours in many different ways. I mean, Cutie Honey back in the 70s had like a really naked, obscene transformation sequence and was meant for little boys to watch. And, no, I get it. I'm not going to be like, well, they don't have problems with that. It was like, well, they do have some issues. But their stuff is so much more violent, so much more adult-oriented. In some cases, they go a little too far, but in many cases, it just gives you an idea of what's going on in reality. And, like, I gotta say, if I was going to choose a place to put down roots for my family, like if I could just choose to completely restart, Japan is a fairly peaceful society, very polite. There's issues, don't get me wrong, I know there's issues. But they don't have anywhere near some of the same kind of, like, violence problems we've got here. They've got other problems, admittedly. But then you end up going like, but... So if cartoon violence caused all this, their society would be burning to the ground.
Oh, and looking at the opposite side, well, I shouldn't say opposite, but the another side of that, going the kind of fun, cute way, is France. The animation that they do over there is absolutely astounding. More and not adult in the sense of waka waka waka, but more adult in the sense of more mature stories that are more deep. And once again, their society is pretty fun, laid back, and once again has problems, but
they've got some issues.
Yeah, but I mean, every society does.
Every society does.
But it's like when it comes to thinking of cartoons causing violence, then once again, like you said, their society would be completely shot because they've done some really crazy, mature, whacked out stuff that I've seen. Like I said, excuse me, there we go. But once again, they're proving to be a powerhouse in the animation area, and especially with their comic stuff. And it's like they see and they realize, as well as Japan, that cartoons and comics aren't just for kids.
It's a cultural element.
It's a form of storytelling, just like TV, just like books, just like newspapers, and just another way to do so. And unfortunately, America, we've gotten better with that, and I think the last probably 7 or 8 years, or probably about 10 years, we're beginning to realize, because people like us are now coming into the storytelling spotlight, and we're finally realizing that, hey, this is the stuff that I always wanted to see growing up. Now I can do so. And it's like, yeah, this stuff, it doesn't always have to be for kids, or if adult, quote unquote, if cartoons are made for adults, they're not stupid, gross out, idiotic comedy stuff.
I'm all for adult entertainment, kids entertainment, but I particularly like real family entertainment. I'm not talking about what America did in the 80s for family entertainment. That was children's entertainment that adults were supposed to sit through and suffer. I'm talking about stuff that adults and kids can watch.
All ages family stuff.
Yeah, stuff where as an adult you get it, It's a little harder and heavier than what the kids are expecting, but that allows the kid to grow, and it allows the adult to watch something that's also a little kiddish,
Yeah,
which is good for you.
And everyone can have fun and talk about it afterwards.
Yeah.
It's like Pixar does a great job with that.
Pixar does an excellent job of that.
A lot of the stuff
Old Disney used to be very good
Oh,
at it.
absolutely. And then a lot of the stuff that we're seeing coming out nowadays is like that too. I mean, as much as people, for some bizarre reason, hate Teen Titans Go because it's not their Teen Titans, it's a really funny show, and they do some really great nods to all ages, to people who's watching who's not of the 5 to 10-year-old
Yeah.
demographic. And I mean, and it's funny, and they do it in a very clever way. I mean, for goodness sakes, they had one whole episode talking about subprime mortgages.
Wow.
And yes, that episode was boring, but I watched it because I was just like, wait, are they really doing this? Like,
Yeah,
they
that's some
actually
funny stuff.
are.
And I'm not a huge fan of the show, but there's been a couple of them I saw that I thought were fairly funny. It's just not typically my kind of show.
That's it exactly.
But if it's funny, it's funny. I mean, what are you going to do?
Yeah, and that's just it. And the people who are just angry about it because, once again, well, it's not the Teen Titans that I like. It's like, well, you know,
That's fine.
That's life. There's a lot of things that I saw that I didn't like, but hey, live a little. But yeah, it's, I just want, I don't know, I'm glad that we're finally beginning to now get past the whole cartoon world for kids, and adult cartoons have to be stupid and idiotic humor.
Yeah, that's,
I
oh,
mean,
stuff always got me.
I mean, I love Archer. Archer's fantastic for what
Yeah,
it is.
that's a funny show.
Yeah, and they make sure just to go, okay, if this is going to be an adult cartoon, it's going to be a fun adult cartoon.
Well, it's slightly off angle, but I think it's looking pretty good. Not bad for a, roughly hour sketch and a whole bunch of BS and some Castle stuff. I always like Castle Grayskull, but I've got an issue with just sort of that. I mean, I get it. It's a toy. I'm not stupid. They had to make a box. I get it. And for what they did, I think they actually did some cool stuff. But the thing that I like about castles, and it's what the Disney castle does right, even though it's not... I like scary castles. It's not very scary. But there's variation in the architecture where one spot doesn't look like anything else, which is not entirely true for all castles, but this is kind of more my mentality of it. I want to see spots where you're like, what is this part here? And what is that part there? You know, like I think there's a hot tub up here. I think that's so. Oh, what was it? The sorceress? Was that her name?
Yes.
The hot eagle sorceress. I'm going like... Eagle's Nest hot tub right there. You know, I'm just saying, I'm an adult. I need this stuff. I'm now approaching 41. I need these things. I just do. You know, observatorium. You can probably see some kind of like magical light coming out and looking at the stars. This is where they feed. This is where they run the children in, and is eaten by the drawbridge and. Then it spits out magical eggs out the back. He-Man. Okay. All right, well, everyone have yourself a good week. I will catch you, I think next weekend. I think we should still be good for doing another one next weekend.
Thank you, everyone, for hanging with us for 2017. Hopefully you guys will stick with us for 2018.
Yes.
As the old saying goes, we see you guys next year.
Yes.
And enjoy your night. If you guys are going to go out and celebrate, please be careful.
All that in a bag of chips.
Yes. Have fun, and may 2018 be as fun as fun.
And Mr. Rogers says, put on your sweater, it's cold. All right, well, everyone have a good one. We will catch you next time.